Hello everyone. I think everyone who's going to be here is here. I think we're being recorded. We are. Just make sure my hair's all right. No, sweaty from riding a bike here. Hello everyone. My name's Neil Lawrenson. I'm Chair of Audit and Governance Committee. Big welcome to everyone, members of the public as well. I've got some notices to read out. Just before, while it's on my mind, if I could just ask people to explain any acronyms or technical jargon that they might use within the context of discussion, particularly with audit and governance. It can get quite technical, and I always assume that 5 million people are watching these meetings and want to understand what we're talking about. So please do explain any acronyms and so on. So before we get onto the agenda, like I said, I just want to share some notices, so do bear with me. So this is indeed a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note that the meeting is also, as well as being recorded, it is being streamed live, and the recordings are subsequently published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you're deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds in the Guildhall, please do leave immediately. Do not hang around collecting any personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you've left the building, the assembly point is the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. I think mine's on. I think you can hear me. So yeah, thanks again for bearing with me. Item number 1 on the agenda is appointment of substitutes. Do we have any substitutes this evening?
Yes, Chair. Yeah, we do. Jabari is here for Jenny Barnes. I've also got apologies from David Blake for tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Julian. So item number 2 is declarations of interest. Well, assuming we're very interested in tonight, because it is audit after all. And we're going to go to public participation. I've been informed that we have one speaker, Mr. Lancaster. If I could ask you to keep your speech to 5 minutes, and I will give a half-a-minute notice towards the end. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm only going to refer to process at this meeting, not to the subject matter of notices of motion. I've reviewed the last 3 years of motions to council, and most of them are completely uncontroversial. For example, they specify regarding ash dieback or astroturf, for example, that the issue is referred to a specific committee, in this case, the Environment Committee. And the rest, mainly, are just write a letter of support or asking for support or something general like that, in which council doesn't take a decision or spend any of our money. There are some exceptions. 3 main ones. The first 2, as I tried to make clear at the previous council meeting, are the policies on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, which are now council policy. My point here is that these policies may lead to disciplinary action, either launched within the council or from a complaint from outside the council, and that therefore will be a matter of controversy and therefore may be legally actionable, because someone may turn around and say to you, was this process properly scrutinized? And you can't reply yes to that. So that's my point on those specifically 2 items. Regarding motions in general, like the Gaza one, and my comments are made whether I agree with the subject matter of a resolution or if I disagree, what is the main difference between a motion to council rather than one that is scrutinized? And there are 2. Firstly, there is no independent officer's report. And secondly, it is not scrutinized on the basis of that officer's report. The independent officer's report gives every councillor the same basic minimum of information. Now, of course, you will know a lot more about your local area. Some of you will have professional qualifications and experience in other areas, which you add to that. But the report gives you the basic minimum on which you make a decision. Secondly, it's a kind of protection, because a member of the public, like myself, may disagree with a decision that you make, but we can't criticize you for being ignorant or reckless, because you have the basis of that independent officer's report. I mean, councillors aren't forced to read the reports, but I trust that you do. So, a resolution that comes to council that is not based on that, we could say that's a substandard resolution, and also opens you up to criticism. And in some cases, it might open the council up to legal action, although I don't think that the Gaza resolution does. But arguably, such resolutions do open the council to reputational harm, particularly when in that kind of situation, councillors are claiming to speak for citizens of Worcester as a whole. I have listened to that debate several times. I think that standing orders say that motions must be about matters for which the council has a responsibility or which affect the city of Worcester. That is interpreted very broadly. And I don't agree with the idea that that motion affects the city of Worcester in the way that these standing orders were drawn up. However, you don't agree with that. My point here is that because there is no report, there would have been no reference to council policies which are relevant to your decision. If there was a report, it would mention standing orders, and that ability to discuss it would no doubt have been questioned. And
Sorry,
the
half a
monitoring
minute
officer,
left, Mr. Lancaster.
sorry,
30 seconds left.
okay, would have had to give an opinion. And also on the question of anti-Semitism, you have a policy. Again, because there was no report, that was not up for saying, and for a decision, again from the monitoring officer, does this go with the anti-Semitism policy or not? So those, Mr. Chairman, are the specific items which I would like this committee to consider in detail, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for attending the meeting.
And you'll forgive me if I don't attend for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, that's fine. Nonetheless, I'll use my position as chair to offer a response, if that's okay, so do bear with me. Firstly, given what we've just heard, I want to assure that everyone that council motions from whoever, whichever party they belong to, are always scrutinised before being added to full council agendas. These are not last-minute documents. They are pored over by the members, by officers, and then they are debated in this building. The speech we just heard is said to have been in support of a request to reconsider standing orders, otherwise known as notices of motion, especially where the proposed subject is not within the council's power to affect and to ensure all decisions get proper scrutiny. That is a reasonable motivation, absolutely. Regarding the ceasefire motion passed by this council on the 28th November 2023, well, I'm going to speak in regard to that motion on the 28th November 2023, which relates to the ongoing genocide in Gaza. I personally proposed that motion, and to see it passed will remain one of my proudest moments while being a member of this council. I believe that our reputation would be harmed by not speaking out against a genocide. If the Speaker is concerned about time being spent on issues that the council does not have immediate power to affect, I would ask him why he didn't give his speech several years ago. I'm old enough to remember when the then Conservative leader and Deputy leader led a half-hour debate about Northern Ireland in a full council meeting in this building. If the Speaker is concerned about time being spent on issues that this council does not have immediate power to affect, I presume he's not in favour of this council supporting Ukrainian people fleeing from war. On page 1 of the Annual Governance Statement 2024-25, which will be discussed towards the end of tonight's agenda, it's stated that Worcester City Council has developed a local code of corporate governance that defines the principles and practices that underpin the governance arrangements operating within this council. Apologies for that meaty quote, but it's taken directly from the paper that we're going to discuss at the end. The first core principle is behaving with integrity, demonstrating strong commitment to ethical values and respecting the rule of law. Therefore, with that first core principle in mind, I believe that the ceasefire motion passed by this council on the 28th November 2023 was completely justified. I believe that Palestinians and Israelis both deserve to live free and fulfilling lives. And I believe that apartheid and genocide should be stopped. So thank you for bearing with me, everyone. I'd like to end by assuring the Speaker that he will receive a written reply from an officer following the meeting. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 4.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't catch that. I'm assuming it was a polite parting greeting. If you want to correct me on that, then see me afterwards. We're going to look at the minutes now. We're going to take them page by page. Councillor Mace already, straight in there.
Yep, sorry, I had a small correction with the minutes. So on the first page, it lists the councillors who are present, and while Councillor Murray is listed as being in place of Councillor Jagger, I think Councillor Kimberley should be listed as being in place of Councillor Cookson, who was much missed in that meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Mace. Any other corrections on page 1 of the minutes from the meeting of this committee on the 25th of February? No? Page 2? Page 3? And page 4? Okay, I'll take that as an accurate record. I'll sign them later on. Bear with me, everyone. I've got 3 tabs open here. Okay, so we're going to move on to the Auditor's Value for Money Report 23-24, and this is going to be led by our colleagues from Assets. So as per usual, we'll have an overview of the report, and then we'll open it up for debate and questions. So Karen, over to you, and Sim as well. Sorry, Karen, just a little more poised, that's all.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to hand over to my colleague Sim, who will take us through this agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
A good evening, Chair, and good evening to the rest of the committee as well. So the auditor's annual report, just to give a brief overview of the purpose of it, this is a legislative report, and it basically covers and collates all of the audit work that we have covered, and it will be covering the financial statements audit as well as the value for money. At an overall, the audit opinion for the financial statements was disclaimed for March 2024, and this is consistent with most of the local government institutions, and the impact of it, as well as the detail of them, was covered in the previous meeting. In terms of the value for money, this audit work was completed, and there were no weaknesses and no key recommendations that were identified. And in terms of the financial statements audit, if you are looking to look at the detail of those findings, it was discussed in the previous meetings, so I won't go into that. And the value for money, the key areas that we looked at was the financial sustainability, the governance, and in the improving economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. And again, there were no key recommendations and no weaknesses that were identified. That's it from me. I'll hand over back to Karen.
Thank you. That's all we wanted to say as an introduction to the Auditor's annual report, so we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you both. So the recommendation is to simply note, and the gag that I always use is that it's impossible not to note a report. So we're not making any decision at the end of this debate, but I would like to open up for debate. Any questions? And to Karen and Tim about the Value for Money Report 23-24. And I'm going to see the hands being raised. Councillor Mace, letting you all go first. Okay, your contribution might prompt others, so carry on.
I hope so. I was trying to avoid going first. So thank you for the report and thank you for coming all the way down to Worcester. I am glad to see that in general there are no significant weaknesses or key recommendations identified, but I am aware from my day job as a software engineer that when I'm asked, are there any bugs in this software, it's impossible to guarantee there aren't any. I can only say that I'm not aware of any. So my question is, what do we think is the biggest hiding place for significant weaknesses, and how much assurance do you think we should take from this report? Thank you.
Thank you. So when we talk about the significant weaknesses and the key recommendations, this is in the context of our value for money responsibilities. So as Sim has mentioned, the areas that we look at are financial sustainability, governance and use of, I'm going to say use of resources, in effect value for money. And in those areas, what we're looking at is the arrangements that the council has in place to deliver those three areas. And I would say that in respect of financial sustainability, we have concluded that the arrangements are in place to support financial sustainability. However, you could argue that the bugs in the system per se under financial sustainability do come through in the context of the council is facing a challenging financial outlook, including the coming year, and it comes back to the strength of your controls and processes and governance arrangements that you have in place to ensure that the risks around about financial sustainability do not materialise. I would say probably financial sustainability, and it is linked to your identified risks, is probably the biggest risk facing the council in terms of when we're looking at those value for money arrangements.
Thank you. So, from what I take from that, hopefully the correct impression is we are doing a good job in very difficult circumstances, we have a lot of financial pressure, and we're doing our best in that situation. The basic problem of the financial stability of the council and the difference between our funding and our spending remains an issue that we have to continue to deal with. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, thank you both. Any other questions, comments about the reports in front of us? No? So we're simply noting it. I should have said thank you for presenting it. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the external audit plan. So again, I'm going to hand over to Azets, Karen and Sim, and this is the external audit plan for 24-25.
Thank you, Chair, and I will take this agenda item. So we have, following very helpful discussions with actually the Chair and the Vice Chair and the finance team, prepared I'm going to say a summary. It's not meant to be a presentation, but it's to provide more contextual information to the external audit plan that is in front of you today. So I'm going to take you through the summary, and hopefully that will inform the external audit plan that you have in front of you today. So by way of background, as you will all be aware, the Council has received disclaimed opinions for the last 3 years now, because we obviously issued a disclaimed opinion for 23-24. As Sim has mentioned as well, the Council is not unique in that position. Other local authorities are in a similar position. They may have less disclaimed opinions, or they may have more disclaimed opinions, but the consideration of a disclaimed opinion is not unique to this council. The government in its communications has made it clear that if a local authority has received a disclaimed opinion and is due to the backstop dates that are now in place to get local authorities back onto a timely audit cycle, then local authorities should not be unfairly judged. Why we have arisen in this position where there have been a number of outstanding audits is it is multifaceted and it is very complex, and there are a number of different reasons for that. It does include capacity in the audit sector environment. It also includes increased regulation on auditors in terms of the audit of the accounts. And to add to all of that, it happened when we were going through a pandemic as well. And there are a number of other reasons, but they are some of the key reasons why we're in this position now. So to address this, the government has come out with a plan which is under 3 different headings: reset, recovery and reform. Reset was introducing the backstop dates for any previous accounts before the 23-24 audit to have been, I'm going to say, signed off by the middle of December 2024. We are now in the recovery phase, which is a phase where we are looking to address not only the backlog to be on a more timely basis in terms of delivering on audits, but address the disclaimed opinions. So the recovery phase is about how we get back to councils receiving a clean, unmodified opinion. And the reform phase is fitting in arrangements to make sure that this does not happen again. So, as I say, in the recovery phase at the moment, and the plan that we have in front of you is covering our proposed plan on how we get the council back to a position where you have an unmodified, clean opinion. How we go about that is, I'm going to say, a sector-wide consideration, and it is involving a number of different stakeholders, key organisations, to consider the challenges that face us in order for us to get back to that position. And that does include, and apologies, Chair, I have got acronyms here, but it does include the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, audit firms, including ourselves, CIPFA, which is the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Accountancy, NAO, which is the National Audit Office, and FRC is the Financial Reporting Council. It is important, I think, to remind ourselves why annual accounts are important and who uses those annual accounts. And I've included within the summary an extract from a statement that was issued by the Financial Reporting Council, and it eloquently sets out that actually they are important. They are important to a number of different users, but in part that importance is that they're timely as well. The annual accounts are complex, as you'll all appreciate. They almost have a dual purpose to them. They are prepared under applicable law, but equally they are prepared under the Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting in the UK, which drives the accounts to be prepared under international financial reporting standards. So while they are prepared under proper accounting practices, they are also required to comply with statutory reporting requirements, so different regulations. So when I say they have a dual purpose, they are complying, as I say, with proper accounting practice, but there are adjustments that have to go through those accounts so that certain users of the accounts see, for example, what the general fund reserve position is, which helps inform those discussions around about financial sustainability for the council. We have a primary responsibility to provide an independent opinion on those accounts, and our responsibilities are in accordance with an act, a code of audit practice, and we have to comply with international standards in auditing. So it is quite complex, it is, and the accounts are quite difficult to interpret, I think. But equally, we have our responsibilities as well to audit those accounts as they are. So I mentioned before there are two parts to this. In the recovery phase, it's that restoration back to a timely audit, and the introduction of the backstop dates is going to serve that purpose to get us back to timely audit reporting, and that covers a 5-year period up to 27-28. The other element, however, is the return to an unmodified opinion. How do we get back to delivering a clean opinion for the council? And one of the key challenges that we have as auditors coming in and auditing those annual accounts is that we have to have assurance over the closing balance in the balance sheet, but equally the opening balance and any in-year movement. And when I say in-year movement, that's in effect the comprehensive income and expenditure statement that's within the accounts. And one of the challenges, because the council has received disclaimed opinions for the last 3 years, is that we have no assurance over the opening balances or the in-year movements from the previous years. One option to address that would be for us to carry out the audits for the last 3 years to recover the assurances that we would need. However, that is highly inefficient. It would be costly, and there are capacity challenges, not only from the external audit side, but equally it would put additional pressure on the financial management team as well, because they would have to be serving us for delivering that audit as well. So as an alternative approach, those key stakeholders that I've mentioned before have been working together to come up with a solution that would enable this issue to be addressed. And it does need to be a sector-wide issue for the entire sector. And from an auditor perspective, we do require it to be regulator-backed, because we can't be in a position that we develop our own approach and the regulators that come in and inspect us disagree with it, because that would potentially land us back where we were previously. So the parties have been working together to come up with an approach, and the proposed approach that we've put to you today is built upon the early stages of those discussions. So we have been involved in those discussions. We know the direction of travel, and indeed the guidance that has come out now has come out. It came out after we've prepared our external audit plan, but before this committee. It does still come with the continued risk in terms of capacity. So as I say, and I do appreciate I keep going on about capacity, but we only have finite resources to deliver an audit. We can deliver an audit in 1 year, but we do obviously have to have additional capacity to ensure that we address this backlog issue. So our external audit plan that's in front of you today does in effect have two aspects to it. It has what we would typically set out in an external audit plan for a typical annual audit. And at the end of the plan, it sets out our proposed approach to dealing with the issue of returning back to an unmodified opinion. So this will be over 3 phases. And the earliest date on which full assurance can be achieved on, I'm going to say, the closing balance sheet position is the 31st of March 2026. What this does require is that would give us the assurance over the closing balances, which we can take into the following year, but we will require a further 2 years of audit, of normal audit, to allow us to have full assurance over the opening balances and the comparative figures, the in-year movements that are disclosed as comparative figures. If we achieve all of that, the earliest we think you would be able to achieve or we get back to an unmodified opinion is 27-28. It does, however, there are still risks and challenges involved in that process, and we will need to work closely with the Council's finance team to ensure that we can stick to that timetable. I did include at the end a final comment about, which was taken again from a Financial Reporting Council paper, which does emphasise that it will require, I'm going to say, joint working between ourselves, the Council's finance team, but equally this committee has a role to play in holding us to account, supporting us, and to get back to that position. So that does then lead us into what you have in front of you in terms of the external audit plan. As I say, it has 2 parts to it: what we're going to deliver in terms of the 24-25 audit, but equally what our proposed approach is to return into that unmodified opinion. I'm going to pause there because that was quite loaded, I think, and I'm happy to take any questions on the back of that.
Thank you very much for giving the context. And yeah, I appreciate from your position, it must seem quite a thankless task because we keep, saying, well, hang on, the audits need to have caught up by now, but you've inherited this legacy of incomplete audits, and this is where we're at. But we've got a plan, albeit one that stretches over 3 years, and happy to open up to debate. I know Councillor May submitted questions for consideration, but I'm just eager to get more involved. Councillor Sarah, Councillor Riaz, I better write this down. Okay, we'll go 1, 2, 3, yeah?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for doing that extra piece of work, because the reason that Neil and I thought it was a good idea is I know that last year I probably asked, does it take more than a year to audit a year's accounts? So it's really, I find it useful to have that in one place, and I hope that if everybody can get all the questions out about it tonight, we don't ever have to come back to that. We will know that that's been discussed, it's minuted, it's recorded in the meeting. This is why we are where we are, but this is why it's not a straightforward, simple thing to do, and this is why the approach is being taken, as you've said. So that's great. Can I just ask you a couple of questions, though? It's just really about your plan here on page 55 with the lovely colour coding. I love a bit of colour coding. So it would appear to me that from what you've said, although it's not clear from here, not explicitly, that in fact each one builds upon the next in a way that makes them dependent. I mean, not just like linked, but actual dependencies. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that is correct. So the years are dependent on building up those three areas that I mentioned. It's the closing balances, the opening balances, but it's the comparators, and the comparators around about the income and expenditure statement. And only by doing those consecutive years and building up that picture will we be able to have that full assurance that we need.
Thank you. Therefore, the next obvious question, how confident do you feel that this series of events is something that you will be able to achieve from what you know today?
So it will be challenging, and it comes back to it will require joint working, partnership working between ourselves and the finance team. There are aspects that will need to be put in place that aren't typical for the audit. For example, we need to have a discussion with management around about your, I'm going to call them fixed assets, your assets on the balance sheet and the value that is associated with those. And typically the council has a rolling programme, but actually for us to achieve this timetable, it will require a full year, in 1 year, revaluation of your assets to allow us to have that baseline. Equally, there are areas such as the pensions, which again we could do now, an audit now, but actually it's not efficient, it's not cost effective for us to go back multiple years when we know, for example, in 25-26 there will be a valuation of the pension fund, and we can use that and then carry that forward. So it will be a challenge, and there are risks associated with it. What I am hoping though is that we have this plan in place now, and we can be coming back to the committee with updates and informing the committee that this is where we are in terms of this plan.
Thank you both. Councillor Riaz?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report and the explanation behind it. Clearly a very complicated and delicate situation we find ourselves in. And I think, first of all, we need to commend yourself and the Vice Chair in terms of being able to come up with a plan that we can kind of stick to in terms of seeing us through in terms of any reputational damage, considering that we, in a post-LGR world, that we may no longer be in existence in our current form in terms of that. So it's actually really, really important that we hand over to whoever kind of takes over in a, I mean, fit and proper isn't the right word, but in a state where everything's accountable and transparent and kind of signed off. That is it's a key reputational risk for us as an administration for not to be, and as a council for not to be in that position. So absolutely in terms of that. I really do want to understand in terms of, has the problem been because of the lack of available data within that? Has the problem been with previous auditors? Has it been with, and I appreciate you may not be able to answer some of this, but were there at any point in those previous 3 years sort of, like you have in a backup on a PC that you can go to a restore point to go back into that point in time to say, take a snapshot of that? Or is it you have to do each an individual 3-year audit from scratch in order to build up that picture? So what are the midpoint? Are there any midpoints that we can kind of recover some of that data to establish a position which may enable to get us there faster?
Yeah, no, thank you. I would say at the outset that the council have prepared their accounts for those last 3 years, and the Section 151 officer is including within those annual accounts a statement of responsibilities that say, in their opinion, those present a true and fair view of the council's finances. So there are accounts in place and there are records that support those accounts in place. The issue is with the external audit and the audit of those accounts. And you're right, we could go back and audit every single set of those accounts, but it would take time to do that. And it's also not efficient, and it would be costly. So the approach that has been considered and developed is we still need to go back, but we are not going back and performing a full audit per se on each individual set of accounts. So we are going to build back the assurance in a more proportionate, risk-based way, based on the accounts and the information that the council holds over those years.
Just a follow-up question. Appreciate that, and I understood that from the message that you explained in that. So the approach that you've taken, how do we know that's a valid approach? Who tests that, the plan in terms of that, apart from us approving it? You must have had some guidance from a higher authority in order to say, actually, that is a sound plan that will see us through if we carried it out.
So the approach that we've presented to you is based on the guidance and the development of the sector-wide guidance that has been issued to date, and we continue to take account of any new and evolving guidance that comes in place. And that guidance is developed by key stakeholders. So it does include the FRC, includes the National Audit Office, includes other audit firms as well. So we are all, I'm going to say, comfortable with the developed approach. It will be then up to this committee to ensure that actually we are delivering against that proposed approach.
Just a final question, Chair. In terms of holding our auditors to account and making sure that they're sticking to plan, what's the process for that?
Yeah, you just had me looking at the dates of the next audit meeting, so I'm assuming that the answer to the question you've just asked is when we next meet as a committee, that's when we scrutinise whether the plan's on track. But, you know, I'm happy to take advice on that. All right. Thank you, Councillor Riaz. Thank you, Karen. Councillor Mace, then Councillor Jagger.
Thank you. I would like to highlight Councillor Riaz's love of audit. It's his second audit meeting of the day. So I'm not the biggest fan of audit in this room. So I have a few questions. The first one picks up on the point Councillor Riaz was taking about the building back assurance. So I'm aware that the backstop date for 24-25 is the 27th of February 2026. And it mentions on page 25 of the ASITS report, 47 of the overall pack, or 51 in the PDF or portable document format, if you want that acronym explained, that there remains a level of uncertainty on our proposed approach as regulator-approved sector-wide approach has yet to be agreed. You mentioned that there's been additional guidance. Yeah, are we at the point yet of there being a regulator-approved sector-wide approach, or are we still waiting for the agreement on that?
So we prepared this report in April. And since then, there has been additional guidance that has come out with this approach to, I'm going to say, phase 3 and the build back of reserves. That came out at the beginning of June. So actually ahead of the timetable that's suggested in our plan. So we are using that guidance, which is now publicly available.
Thank you, because I was going to ask if it wasn't available whether it would be useful for the chair to write to the relevant bodies, but it sounds like that's not, that wouldn't be needed. It also mentions that for this schedule, we need our draft financial accounts for 24-25 published by the 30th of June. Are we on schedule for that to happen?
If I may, Chair, yes, we are. We have a draft of accounts. We are going through it. There are still some things we are checking, double checking, and there's some things that we need to sort out. But with a fair wind, we will be there.
Great, thank you. Again, on the page 29 of the Audit's report, labelled page 51 of the overall pack and 55 in the PDF, mentions that the building back assurance process depends on the council's capacity within the finance team to support the build back process. Are we happy we have that capacity available?
I think it's going to be difficult, and I think we need to work together, and as more guidance comes out, we need to understand what the implications of that. But for me, this is the priority. Like Councillor Riaz said, it's not only it's the whole officers and councillors in terms of having that reputation of handing over the money to a new organisation, knowing exactly where we're at, and we want confidence with that. So it's one of those things that we're just going to have to get into our work plan as a priority, along with a lot of other priorities. But it doesn't get any, it's not exciting or anything like that, but I think it is fundamental to the bedrock of what the rest of the council does. So, it's for me, and, Cathy is the one with all of the team that do all of the hard work about pulling this together and making sure that we can get the right people doing the right tasks to make sure we hit those deadlines.
Okay, thank you. And I know the budget doesn't come through this committee, but it's if there are additional resources needed, let's make sure that comes into the budget so that we are able to get this assurance. And my final question, as Councillor Barnes is not here, and I'm sure she would ask this question because I know she's asked about fees due for audits in previous years, and I know it's previously been asked, are we going to be paying the full audit fees? And I think the response at the time was it will be determined by the relevant bodies. So my question is, has the fees for the previous years been determined by those relevant bodies yet? And will full fees be due this year?
I think I'm going to ask Cathy to give me a hand in a moment, but for the 24-25, I think there's still some discussions to be had. For 23-24, there was a survey that ended a couple of weeks ago, so I think that is still working out some of those numbers, because there's like a main fee, and then there's some additional ones based on the extra work that goes on. I think the main fee is like all set and it's all there. It's just some of those little extra ones. And then Cathy's got some information if you go back a number of years from when you had EY. So, Cathy.
Yes, so when we had EY, the last 2 or 3 years, we had a reduced audit. The Public Sector Auditors Appointment Board have set the fees, but we've yet to receive the bills from Ernst & Young, so I can't quite confirm them at the moment. We do anticipate, and we have made provision for a very basic fee with no hidden extras, etc. So, fingers crossed.
Thank you very much, and I'm all done. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you all. Councillor Jagger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this report and for explaining everything for those of us who are not experts in this area. I have a question regarding from page 33. You said that your risk assessment procedures have identified as being close to upper range of expected certain risks. So you then list a number of risks that are either very high, and a few of them are low. Can you tell me a little bit more about what this means? So what does it mean in as simple language as you can? What does it mean that we have a high risk of, what's the first one? Management override of controls. And is that very unique to us as an institution, or is this a very generic risk for situations for institutions in our situation?
Okay, and please do come in if I speak audit chat. So there are for public sector bodies, there are 3 presumed risks when we audit financial statements. And one of those is management override of controls. So this is where there's the potential for management to put undue influence on their teams to override, for example, journals to deliver a more favourable financial position. So because it's a presumed risk, we always assess that as very high. And you will see that not only actually in the public sector, but you would see that across any audit in the commercial sector as well, that is a presumed risk, and there's no opportunity for us to rebut it. It is always there. The other 2 risks that are presumed risks in the public sector are on page 35 and 36. So we also consider fraud in respect of revenue recognition. So again, this is where there's potential manipulation of your revenue to recognise a more favourable position. And again, that is an area which you would see in a commercial organisation as well, probably more pronounced in a commercial organisation because they are profit-driven, and public sector bodies are not profit-driven. And we do, unlike the management override of controls, we do have the opportunity to think about the arrangements, the processes, what the types of income revenue that the council generates, and we can rebut that presumed risk. And that is what we have done for this council, which is why we've therefore assessed it as low. If it was still a risk, it would be either high or very high, depending on our assessment of the council's arrangements. The reason we rebut that risk is largely because of the types of revenue that the council has. So if we think about it in the terms of government grant funding and council tax and business rates as well, they're not easily manipulated. So that's why we can rebut them. The one that is public sector specific is almost, well, it flips the revenue recognition on its head and goes, well, actually for public sector bodies, the risk is more around about expenditure. So you receive the funding and it's how you deliver those services using that funding. So there is more of a risk around about expenditure and manipulating the expenditure to deliver that desired outcome. But for this council, again, we've gone through the assessment and considered the types of expenditure that the council has. And again, we have rebutted that risk and we've assessed it as low. That might not be the case for all councils. It depends on the arrangements that are in place. The other risks that are within this are specific to the council. I say they're specific to the council. You will typically find them in other local authorities' audits, but we have gone through that assessment and assessed them as a specific risk to this council. And depending on the arrangements, we have a spectrum for assessing the risk. So it can go from low to very high. And depending, as I say, on our assessment, we will assess that differently. We don't typically include as a significant risk any areas that we have not assessed as high or very high. We would if we think it is an area that we want to consider, we will include it in this plan or through our reporting to those charitable governance, but we haven't deemed it as a significant risk. The reason why you are seeing lows, though, is because the lows are there for the presumed risks that we have to rebut.
Okay. Thank you both. Yes, Councillor Cookson.
Just one question. You talk about this being a very ambitious and challenging timeline to get to 2028. What happens if you miss it, given that the council probably won't exist at that point? Because I mean, as a project manager, I'm used to the fact of things don't always go to plan, and therefore you've got to build contingency in, but you can't just go, oh, the contingency is we'll do it again because we won't be here.
So the introduction of the backstop dates means that we won't miss the timely return to auditing. There does still exist a risk, though, that actually what that opinion looks like in 27-28, and if we collectively do not deliver on this, it could be that the council is still facing disclaimed opinions because we've not been able to get all the assurances that we need. So you could potentially be going into local government reorganisation with a disclaimed opinion. But you would have an opinion because the backstop date requires us to provide an opinion by that date.
Councillor Jagger. Yep.
Last question. On page 37, you talked about the risk of valuation of land and buildings, and you've assessed that as being high. And if I understood you correctly before, those are the ones that are not presumptions, so these are specific to this council. Can you give me a specific example of what made you include this as a risk as high, and if there is anything that we can do to mitigate that potential risk, assuming that we won't have the final advice at this stage?
So again, please come in if I talk audit speak. So it's specifically around about the valuation of your land and buildings and investment properties, and the valuation is applied through a series of assumptions. And one of the areas that we need to consider as auditors when we're looking at the accounts is what accounting estimates and judgments has management applied in developing those accounts. And one of the main areas that they do that is in the valuation of land and buildings. So they typically, they will engage with experts to provide those valuations, but there are a lot of inputs and assumptions that make up those valuations. And for us, there is a risk around about what those inputs and assumptions are that have been applied in generating those figures that feature in your accounts. So we have deemed this as it can be material to the accounts, and you could face a material misstatement in your accounts subject to the outcome of our review of those. And we've deemed this what we call a key accounting estimate. So where we identify things as so material, so critical that it could potentially, if you could face a risk of material misstatement in your accounts, then we will assess that as high. And we're talking big figures on the balance sheet. So in simple language, does that mean that we could find out that we overpaid or underpaid for overpaid for a building
or sold something for significantly less than it was worth. Is that what that means?
No, so the valuation of your land and buildings is, so this is where it comes into your proper accounting practices and complying with accounting standards. So the council is required to disclose on its balance sheet the fair value of those assets. And this is around about making sure that that fair value that is disclosed on your council's balance sheet is actually a fair value and it's not subject to any material misstatement.
Okay, thank you both. Any further questions before I'm minded to wrap this one up and probably have a break? Okay. So we are simply noting, I think we've quizzed it enough, but the recommendation is to note the report, the external auditor's plan, I should say, for 24-25. Just before I take arms in the air or nods of heads, I just want to very quickly come back to what Councillor Cookson said about contingencies and sort of kicking the can down the road, sort of endlessly, but the potential for endlessly putting the date back. Hopefully what we're about to say will give a reassurance, because within the external audit plan, it mentions so-called backstop dates. So these are dates when things have to be done. And this is not us saying it, this is national legislation passed last year saying accounts need to be audited by such and such a date, such and such a date, going right up to 2028. So for anyone listening, watching in, that's been mandated by the government that things have to be done by a specific time, and obviously it's the remit of this committee to ensure that that work is being done so that we can get things done by those dates. So that's on page 2 of the PDF version of the external audit plan for anyone watching. I'm sure there are loads. So yeah, thank you very much everyone. Thanks in particular to Karen Sim. If it's okay, we'll have a 5-minute break, and then we've got some still very important agenda items coming up, but I think it's sensible to have a break for now. Thank you all. Yeah, sorry, I was getting the right report in front of me. Sorry, Julian. Jolt there. No, it's not a celebration, is it, to be fair? Yeah, we'll carry on. Thank you, everyone. We've come to agenda item 7, which is the annual report of internal audit for 24-25. The report will be for noting, and it's going to be led and introduced by Chris Green. So, hand over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, firstly, internal audit is required to present an annual opinion on the Council's framework of internal control, governance and risk management, which then feeds into the annual governance statement that you're also considering this evening. We're also required to explain how the conclusions have been reached and the basis for them, and we're required to confirm annually the extent to which we comply with internal auditing standards. I'm pleased to say the annual report is a positive reflection on the Council. There's a reasonable level of assurance, which is the 2nd grade. All of the 11 graded audit assignments resulted in at least a level of reasonable assurance, and the appendix shows the results of each audit and an executive summary for each one. Many of these were actually reported during the course of the year through the internal audit progress reports. I've also highlighted in the summary opinion the recent Doing the Right Thing governance training that was provided to all managers and team leaders in February, and that demonstrates the Council's commitment to good governance. The training covered contract management, the new procurement code, gifts, hospitality, conflicts of interest and code of conduct. I've also noted the corporate peer challenge, which highlighted the positive culture at the Council, and that there's more work planned in 2025-26 to enhance the risk management framework, and that includes bringing the oversight for that through this committee, deep dives and more monitoring and reporting through corporate leadership team. Moving on to the performance of the internal audit service, there were a set of new key performance indicators that was introduced for 2024-25. They've all been achieved. We delivered 91% of the anticipated days, 81% productivity compared with 66 at the end of the previous year. The Council has a good record of implementing agreed audit recommendations, and all of the ones that we followed up that were medium or high risk were found to be implemented. And the customer satisfaction was 100% from individual surveys and 92% from the independent external quality assessment. We've also focused on other continuous improvement activity, and that's included an auditor skill set review. We now evaluate fraud risks on every audit, and we're developing a long list of audits which have been mapped against the risk register entries and corporate objectives. All members of the team have also attended environmental sustainability training towards the end of 2024, and we've appointed a team champion for that area who will lead on our audit work on those areas. I'm required to confirm that we are organisationally independent and explain how we demonstrate that, and that's covered within Section 5 in Appendix A. Section 4 covers quality assurance and compliance with the standards. As mentioned before, the external quality assessment results were positive, and they were reported to the committee in September 2024 and showed us to be in general conformance with the standards. And also the new quality assurance policy, which was again endorsed by this committee in September, we're required to confirm that we're operating in conformance to that. So I've included that statement within the report. Moving forward, there are new global internal audit standards which apply for 2025-26. They replace the previous public sector internal audit standards. We've reviewed those. We're already mostly in compliance, but paragraph 4.8 in the appendix sets out some further actions that we plan over the coming months. The main one being the development of a formal internal audit strategy for the next 3 years, which will come to the committee later this year for review and approval. Other than that, members are asked to note the report, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris, and thanks to the wider team involved in all of the audit work that goes on, or has gone on, I should say. Thank you very much. So, Councillor Sarah, straight in there. Any other comments, questions from anyone else? Councillor Mace? Okay, I'll take those two for now. Councillor Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. We were discussing during our agenda planning session about having a refresh of the risks that we're managing. Is that going to be part of what you're going to help us do as part of this? Because I don't see it anywhere specifically. And we did say we would try to plan quite soon a risk assessment workshop for all members to get that kicked off and to try and broaden the scope.
Thank you. So first of all, I can confirm that we've, in the next item, the internal audit plan for 2025-26, we have built in some time to, but that's more from an assurance perspective on risk management. That said, as a matter of course, business as usual, the council does make use of ourselves on a consultancy basis, on an ad hoc basis, as things are happening within the organisation, and risk management is definitely one of those. And I know from other examples where Rachel sent me draft documents and asked me to look at them, I've absolutely done that and will continue to do so. But that probably wouldn't be a significant time commitment, so that's something that we would just do. But there's an audit in the plan as well, so you'll get an assurance report later in 2025-26.
Just to add to that, we're looking at refreshing the risk management strategy, which will be a completely separate report, which I'm aiming to bring back to September audit committee, and that will have like our corporate risks with a lot more detail on there. And what we'd look to do is a deep dive at each sort of committee meeting where risk was on the agenda, so that you could see the latest risks that the council's facing and actually have that more detailed discussion about that. So that will be something that the internal audit team can make sure that we're doing things in the right and proper way, but that's how the two things will dove together, really.
Thank you for that. So in my working life, I was involved in risk assessments in the IT world, and it was always a matrix of, probability not probability, likelihood and damage, essentially, and therefore you'd have a sort of 3 by 3 come out of that. In what I've seen in the paperwork so far, that's not used. Is that because you distill it out in anything in the top right-hand corner, you call that high?
Thank you. So actually, within our detailed reports, every recommendation has a rating against it. And one of the changes that was brought in with the new global audit standards is that the reports that we issue needs to be aligned with each organisation's risk management framework. And you're quite right, Worcester City Council has its own assessment matrix of likelihood and impact. And for the last 6 to 9 months or so, we've been using that matrix in our recommendations. One of the other things that we'll be looking at moving into in 2025-26 is that in addition to the assurance rating, can we give a overall risk rating for that particular area? And again, that would be aligned with the council's risk management framework.
Thank you both. Councillor Mace.
Thank you, and thank you to Chris and your team for the report, and also well done to all the officers that have been rated substantial or reasonable assurance in their controls. I'm glad you've highlighted the environmental sustainability audit training and the service champion. I was really pleased to see those. I'd be interested to know how we've got the 11 audits and all of them were substantial and reasonable assurance, how that compares with other councils in Worcestershire, and do they get similar ratings when they're going through their internal audit? And I've got one more question afterwards.
Thank you. I'd say slightly above. There's a broadly familiar picture across the patch. Most of the financial systems audits, and there were quite a few carried out for Worcester during 24-25, they are generally speaking either reasonable or substantial. I haven't, in all honesty, written all the annual reports yet, yours is the first committee, so I've done yours first. I've done a couple of yours, so I know from writing those that you're overall you're above those, but there'll be others on the patch that are sort of similar. So I'm not giving you a definitive answer, but you're sort of towards the top end, if that helps.
You've given me some reasonable assurance. Thank you. Yeah, that's my audit joke for the evening. The final question was on the audit for council tax, page 13 of the report, page 71 of the report pack, or page 75 of the PDF. There's a mention of arrangements are more flexible to consider the cost of living crisis and customer financial situations. So this might be a question that Rachel's better armed to answer, which is, Martin Lewis has raised that some councils, when residents fall into arrears, will immediately demand the remaining tax due for the year, which obviously can put a great burden on residents. Is that something we do or not?
Definitely not. We work with all the residents just to find a way of working with them to see what they can afford, whether it might be working with their Citizens Advice Bureau. You know, there's different flexible ways of making payments. We don't automatically, you know, send a debt collector out there. We do soft reminders. We invite them to contact us on a whole range of different media. And then we also will look to sort of signpost them into like hardship funds or council tax support funds as well to reduce their, you know, their liability. So at all points we try and work with the resident to make sure that they're in a position where they can make the payment. Of course we want to recover the money as well, but you know, we go along very slowly and steadily and making sure that anybody's vulnerable, that we're treating them with the utmost respect and making sure that we get everything that we can do to support them.
Great, thank you very much. Glad to hear it.
Thank you both. So any further questions, comments about the annual report for last tax year's internal audit? No, so we're just noting the report. I'm assuming that we have. Thank you very much, Chris, and you can't go home just yet. Sorry about that. So we've had the report for 24-25. We're going to next talk about agenda item 8, which is the plan, he says, from memory, had it in front of him, for next year, bear with. Indeed, the internal audit plan for 25-26. And hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair. And this time members are actually being asked to approve something, which is the internal audit plan for 2025-26, with or without amendments. It's a risk-based plan designed to support the Council in achieving its objectives. There is a change of approach for this year, so there is more information, including links to risk register entries, and that will help members align the results of audits alongside the committee's role in risk management oversight. And we've included the indicative coverage. The audits were selected following a review of results over the last few years, broad risk assessments and a knowledge of areas of change. So we have, for example, the new Procurement Act. There's the organisation focus on risk management that was mentioned in the previous item, and also a focus on value for money given the financial challenges facing the organisation. In addition, there's also time for providing assurance that agreed actions arising from last year's audits have been implemented, and there's an 18-day contingency for ad hoc advice and as a buffer from a project management perspective. The plan itself was developed in consultation with senior management, and members of this committee were also invited to input to the process. The draft plan was approved by the corporate leadership team on the 27th of May. It's consistent with the requirements of auditing standards, and the resource allocation is 275 days, which is the same as last year. And just to emphasise, the plan isn't set in stone. So in approving it today, it's important to note that we'll be flexible, we can respond to emerging risks and issues. The aim is to continually be maximising the value added to the Council. And this committee is the gatekeeper to the plan. So any significant amendments will be brought back here for review and approval. Progress will be regularly reported to this committee as in previous years. And the next report, which will be in September, the progress report will show indicative reporting dates for the result of each of the audits. Members, as I say, have been asked to approve with or without amendments, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, for the report and presentation. So any questions, comments about the internal audit plan? And as Chris said, we will be hopefully approving the plan. Councillor Mace?
Sorry, I thought Councillor Riyad said his hand up then.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the report and the plan. I'm pleased to see the environmental inequalities impact assessments audit on there and the IT security, including cyber disaster recovery and backup areas review. I know I raised IT security last year, in particular in relation to password and access policies, which I'm pleased to say, at least for me, a lot of the issues have been improved. But I know there are other members who continue to have issues. So I was wondering if this will look at just at are we secure, or will it also look at are we striking the right balance between security and access or ease of access for people using systems? And the other question I had was, obviously we've had a recent test of our rapid response procedures with Barb Works, which seems to have, it's been very difficult to deal with, but the council seems to have dealt with it as well as it can. I'm wondering if an audit of that area is something worthwhile to do in the year while the experiences are still fresh. Thank you.
Thank you. So, first of all, in relation to cybersecurity, any audit on cybersecurity will naturally focus more on the are we safe and secure question more than the convenience question. But what we'll do when we do that review is we'll approach yourself and any other members that have questions on concerns on that matter, and get an understanding for the issues that have been faced, because sometimes there is another option which is less difficult but still ticks the are we safe and secure question. So we will pick up on that, but as I say, naturally the audit will be about are we safe and secure, because the impacts of a successful attack are enormous, really.
Any questions, comments? Yep, got one of my own, but yeah, go ahead, Councillor Sarah. Oh, sorry, I thought you would. Yeah, carry. I'll come back to you, Councillor. Yeah.
Sorry about that. So there's the second part of the question, which was about emergency planning, in essence, and emergency planning and response. We've got three options. We can add this into the audit plan if the committee wishes, but remove something else from the plan so it remains around that 275-day mark. We can add it to the plan if members wish, but there'd be a small cost associated with that for the extra days. That would be around about £3,000 as an estimate. Or, because the plan isn't set in stone, you could have it as a kind of top of a backup list, so that if for whatever reason there's an audit on this plan that it's not suitable for us to carry out, and that does happen, that we would automatically pick this one up first.
Sorry, just to come back. I mean, I'm interested to hear what other people's opinions on it. I mean, maybe it's too live and too soon, but I just thought it was worth asking the question.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Sayret and then Councillor Jagger.
Thank you. So this, I think, is linked to what I'm still struggling to find here. I'm looking to see that part of the plan is this review of all the risks that we have, because I don't think they've been reviewed and checked for a while. I think as a council, it would be a valuable all-member activity to do, and any concerns like that we can assess at that point how high a priority do we want to give to this, and then you've got your answer as to where the pecking order stands. So what am I missing from here? Because I thought you said that was in here. I hadn't seen it, but I still don't see it.
Thank you. So first of all, there's a distinction between what would be a formal internal audit plan and what would be in an officer working and project plans. So I'm aware that Rachel is going to be leading a piece on this, but the internal audit plan, which if you see so this is page 83 on Appendix 1, I'm just looking at the pack, 3, 4, 5, the fifth line down says risk management, assessment of the effectiveness of the council's arrangements to manage its risks and the level of risk maturity of the council. That would include reviewing the risk registers. And yeah, there's a budget in there for that. So.
Rachel,
Yeah, I suppose it's just to add, in effect, internal audit are going to be auditing me and what I'm doing and what my team are doing with those risks, so that there's twofold here. So I'm updating the risk management strategy. I'm going to have a complete new risk register that CLT will put forward, and members can add, remove, up, downgrade those sort of risks. But also alongside that, at some point during the year, Chris's team are going to come in and say, "Are you doing that right? Are you doing the meeting?" So.
That's fine, because you can only actually audit what you've got, yeah? But the getting to have we actually got the right things, that's what I'm looking at. So where does that sit in terms of who's managing that activity? Maybe that's the piece I'm missing.
In terms of what is on those risk registers, it will start off with the risk management strategy, looking at risk appetite and things like that. It will start at CLT, and then it will roll down to making sure that all of our projects that we've got have got risk registers. A lot of them already have, and it's just making sure that they're compliant with the latest risk management strategy. And then there's already service risk registers as well. So it's just about revisiting those in the light of a new sort of more involved sort of strategy, and just making sure that that is more sort of open and transparent and readily available. But the corporate ones, we intend to report to this committee on a regular basis during the municipal year.
thank you both. Councillor Jagger?
I just want to go on Alex's point about looking at risks for emergency situations. I would be interested in seeing some work in whichever format we can manage it, looking at how external risks might affect our budgets in emergency situations, particularly in light of what has just happened in Claims. So I would be very supportive of any options that would allow us to assess those risks and think about them collectively based on their recent experience.
Sorry.
I mean, we do have business continuity plans for the council. We also, which we do review, and we also obviously hold reserves for the scenario where an unforeseen risk arises. I think it would be very difficult to spend time forecasting all the external risks that could impact on the council, and that's one of the reasons we have the business continuity plan and the overall risk reserve, isn't it?
Okay. I've also got a question about risk. Is that okay? I kind of raised it in the pre-meeting about risk register links. I just thought it'd be worthwhile asking the question again, basically. So page 1, sorry, of appendix 1, it says in the column risk register links, none identified against contract management, risk management and environmental inequalities impact assessments. And, looking at that as a layman, I'd be thinking, and am thinking, where are the registers? What are we linking that to? So I just wondered if you could clarify what the none identified in terms of risk registers means.
Thank you, Chair. So the council's got a corporate risk register and a series of service risk registers, and they're held on the Ideogen Pentana system. We reviewed all of those, but where it says non-identified, it means that the council doesn't have a risk related to that subject currently recorded either on the corporate risk register or on any of the service risk registers. And I think that demonstrates why this particular piece of work is required in 2025-26, because the chances are that following that exercise there will be risks around those areas, and clearly there are. There are risks around contract management, procurement and so on.
Thank you. And I've got one question, which is, I recall last time you said that this plan we can contribute to this plan at any point, basically. We don't need to wait until committee meets. So if any member of this committee and the rest of the council has a suggestion in terms of parts of the council that can be audited, we can simply feed that back to officers and then you can add it to the plan. Is that correct?
We can, but the committee would then need to ratify it at the following meeting. But absolutely, yes, it's not set in stone. So there's so much going on at the moment that the local government picture won't look the same at the end of this financial year that it looks now. So it's right and proper that we respond to any emerging issues or risks during the course of the year.
Thank you very much. Okay, so yeah, thanks again for the report and presenting it, the plan, sorry, this evening, and the report. So this is an internal audit plan for 25-26, and the recommendation is to approve it with or without amendments. I've not noted any amendments. I'm assuming that everyone's happy to approve the report and plan as presented this evening. So arms in the air. Perfect. Thank you very much. Chris?
Thanks, Jed. Can I just add that I'll keep in mind the question about reviewing emergency planning. So, you know, as and when any assignments drop from the plan, I'll bring that in as a proposal to take in the change.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so we are on the finishing straight, I believe. So the next item on the agenda is the annual governance statement. So for 24-25. So again, we're looking back at the past year, and we do have a recommendation to approve, or hopefully approve, the governance statement, which is in Appendix 1, which will then be signed off, if we approve it, by the leader of the council and the managing director. And Sian Stroud is going to present this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's that time of year again. The annual governance statement is part of our overall assurance framework. It accompanies our published accounts, and it is subject to scrutiny by external auditors. And I noticed actually that the recent Local Government Association peer review also took account of our annual governance statement for the last few years in providing their commentary around assurance and governance. So the annual governance statement is a narrative document. It's a look back at the year that's gone and how we've used effective governance to deliver outcomes at the City Council. The committee will recall that we made a decision a few years ago not just to itemise our processes, but just to explain how good governance delivers outcomes, whether those be value for money or interventions in the community or whatever that might be. The annual governance statement also comments on challenges that have happened during the year, unforeseen and planned, and what's ahead of us. Some of the challenges will be familiar to the committee insofar as we still have an uncertain future as regards long-term local government finance, and that has continued to have an impact on the district council and some of the choices that we've had to make about services that we can fund in order to set a balanced budget. There are obviously a number of standard governance issues that we've navigated this year. Again, the committee will be familiar with our regime in terms of training, recording attendance at training, making sure that our courses and our development offer for members and officers remains relevant. Similarly, we always review parts of the Constitution and various policies during the course of the year, and we've continued to do that. Similarly, we've continued to hold ourselves to account for any complaints which are upheld against us, local government ombudsman. There was one local government ombudsman complaint upheld against the council that related to delay in processing a complaint rather than the substance of the complaint. The apology that we'd given in relation to that complaint was found to be adequate with no further action to be taken. The annual governance statement also reflects on whether there's been any significant legal action involving the council in the year, in the outgoing year. And the only one that I'm able to record as being significant it hasn't come to pass, but it was a threat from another council, a kind of a class action going around the country against all local authorities, which was originating in Thurrock Council and related to Thurrock's choices around prudential borrowing and acquisition of large properties. The sector's view is that claim is misconceived and that it's very bad faith to try and bring a claim against other local authorities. And I should advise you that Worcester City Council is not currently formally named in any legal action from Thurrock. Again, the annual governance statement needs to reflect on changes in national legislation which have an impact on our risk management and our delivery of services. So we've reflected new service impacts through the Environment Act and also the public safety provisions of what's known as Martin's Law, the Terrorism Protection of Premises Act. And of course, as a council with a number of events in the city centre, that is a piece of legislation we need to keep our eye on. It's a welcome piece of legislation. I think we'd all agree. The impact for us is financial when it comes to pass in terms of the acquisition of hostile vehicle mitigation measures. We obviously already buy those, but more of that, more risk assessment, etc. So then just moving on through the rest of the document, we talk about how we've developed more policies and strategies and engaged and reviewed those that we've had in place for a number of years. So we are guided by a city plan, and we've undertaken a refresh of that in the outgoing year. Similarly, we've undertaken our annual residence survey, and we've discussed that at committee and noted that the survey sample was not particularly representative. The data was rich, but it couldn't be viewed as reflective of the residents we serve. So we've set ourselves a challenge to make sure that we are surveying and sampling in a more representative way going forwards. And we asked the LGA peer team for some reflections on that as well when they came. Just wanted to give that as an example of how we have a sort of dynamic conversation around improvement as we go forward. We obviously, members will be well aware that we held another election and that we've now got new electoral warding boundaries, both in relation to districts and the county divisions. And then I suppose just pulling out another couple of matters. I don't really want to dwell on the major programmes because we have, as we know, we have established governance around them and they're all now in delivery mode. But I think a highlight this year was getting the South Worcestershire Development Plan finally into examination, and members will be aware that that examination has largely been hosted in our building, which again I think we're very pleased about. In terms of challenges going forwards, it's quite clear that one challenge we didn't anticipate was reform of local government, reorganisation of local government. So we've added that to our significant challenges. And as we know, that sits uncomfortably alongside a lack of clarity about the local government finance position. And we are having to take a very short-term and very forensic view to the finances. And I know members are very much aware of that. So as I say that, obviously I'm reflecting on that position is even more acute now than it was reflecting on this outgoing year. So going forwards, clearly being able to set a balanced budget remains probably our most significant governance challenge. On the positive side, we have been able to successfully recruit a new Section 151 and a Deputy Section 151, so no pressure there, officers. In terms of other issues to draw to your attention, the local government reorganisation timetable is challenging, and there is still a lack of clarity about how that process will ultimately be navigated, given the amount of councils that are being asked to reorganise at the same time against the same timetable. And undoubtedly that will consume resource at a time when our resources are very finite. Chair, I'll stop there. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Sean. For a very comprehensive and easy to read report. I mean, easy, but just visually very appealing and yeah, comprehensive. And just before I forget to mention, I want to thank yourself and all officers, particularly given what you just said about local government reorganisation and, you know, let's be honest, the uncertainty that people will be feeling about their own livelihoods. And it's something I think about a lot, not just because I want to be nice, but I'm actually worried about people. So I just want to thank you for the report, the work over the last year, and just put it on record that I acknowledge the uncertainty that officers will be feeling because of that reorganisation, and I'm even more grateful for what you do, particularly given that context. So I've got a couple of comments. I think they're comments, not questions, but I want to open it up first of all. Councillor Riaz, Councillor Mace, yeah. Councillor Riaz, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just a wider comment, and one part I suppose you didn't mention in terms of that is actually the quality of the councils and the level of scrutiny we hold our officer corps and our teams to, and we expect a lot of our officer corps and our council, and you know, part of the thank you I want to say is obviously the amount of resilience that we have got in our officer corps team that are able to, at a snap of a finger, deal with crises like Barbon works and deliver an excellent service and still maintain the multiple millions of pounds that we have been delivering for Worcester. So that's a credit in terms of in terms of our resilience and the level of debate and quality of questions that we have from here that keep you guys on your toes. So well done.
Thank you, Councillor Riaz. So, Councillor Mace.
Yeah, thank you. And I definitely echo everything Councillor Riaz just said as well. I had two general points I just wanted to make. On point 3.6, which is page 9 of the supplementary agenda, it mentions that the overall attendance at training sessions from councillors was only 46%. I wanted to personally say thank you to the officers for all the training that's been delivered in the last year, because I found it very good and very, very interesting, and I would hope everyone here can feedback to their group saying we want to see a much higher attendance in the next year, because it has been really useful, and I think it's only fair to officers who put the time and effort into putting together that training that we take every opportunity given to us where we can. On point 3.17, there was a mention about the council was also successful in receiving £2.3 million of levelling up funding, which I put in my notes is only half the story, but I feel like it's only a tiny modicum of that story, because I remember seeing a extra P&R meeting in the election period in 23-24 to determine what projects we were going to be spending that original £5 million on, and then the amount of time spent in meetings through the next year talking about whether we were going to hear back about what was happening. It consumed a huge amount of officer time setting all that up, you know, and I hope that we don't see those kind of situations repeated in future where an amount of money suddenly drops out of the sky. We have to very quickly determine what we're going to do with it on very short time scales, and then we don't actually get it in the end anyway. So in some ways, it wasn't a giant waste of time, because what comes out of it is going to be very useful, but there was a huge amount of effort put into there on a constrained council that, you know, could have been better managed by bodies outside of our own. But yeah, that's where we are, and I just wanted to mention it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mace. Councillor Jagger.
I just want to say thank you for putting up with us. And I'll just keep it short. Thanks.
Can I respond? Just to say that, you know, good governance requires these kind of conversations around these kind of tables, and we welcome that, and that is our culture at Worcester. And I think we should just recognise that although this is a document that looks back at a year that's gone, we're just going to be shortly celebrating the publication of our Local Government Association peer review report, which really commends members and officers for the teamwork approach at Worcester City Council. And certainly we welcome that, and it makes for a safe and pleasant working environment. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean. You slightly stole my thunder there, because I was going to bring that one up. But you're allowed. You're more senior than me. I've got 2 points. I think we'll, well, more experienced anyway. I'm going to wrap up, presuming that I'm the only one with comments to share. I'm just looking around, making sure that's the case. Yeah, so one little bugbear in the report, but I think I've raised it before. It's just a phrasing, that's all it is. But it's a wider point about making reports accessible, I think. And that's notwithstanding what I said at the start. It is a very easy to read report, but it was just the subheading, determining the interventions necessary to optimise the achievement of the intended outcomes. And I think that could be simplified, and that's the only point, you know, actions to follow or something like that. But I'm going to end on the positive, which was the Local Government Association Corporate Peer Challenge. So just to add another thing in the mix, you know, with the budget challenges and the local government reorganisation, officers were working with councillors and I believe officers from around the country to review how Worcester City Council runs itself. And David Blake, the Managing Director of Worcester City Council, emailed councillors and maybe officers as well on the 5th of June with the report. And on page 17, and I think this would relate to the public participation slot at the very start of this meeting. On page 17, I quote, "The peer team found evidence of good governance across the organisation." So if you want extra assurance in addition to the fine report that you've just presented, you've also got the Corporate Peer Challenge report from the Local Government Association saying Worcester City Council is run very well indeed. And I think particularly given all the challenges that we're facing, to hear that, to read that, is even more special. So I'm going to not end on grammar, I'm going to end on that. So yeah, we have an actual approval to do here, don't we? So yeah, we want to, well, hopefully we will all approve the annual governance statement 24-25 in Appendix 1 for sign-off by the Leader of the Council and the Managing Director for inclusion in the annual statement of accounts. All those in favour? Thank you. Thanks again, Sean. So I believe we've come to any other business. I've not been made aware of any items. No? Yeah, Councillor Riaz, thank you so much for your pointer, because I just want to end by thanking our colleagues from Assets. And Karen, I know you've travelled a long way to get here. Sim, I'm not sure how far you've travelled, but let's just assume you've both travelled a long way to come. So I want to thank you for that, and also thank you, of course, for the work that you have done and are doing. And thank you, Councillor Riaz, for reminding myself to thank them. Okay, and thank you everyone for attending and your contributions. Safe journey. Thank you.